Data doesn't lie, your go-to for the science behind the art of parenting.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for doing this. Guys, this is a good friend of mine. Her name's Lisa Wallace. She's an awesome mom of twin 4-year-old boys. I can't even imagine.
5, actually. They're 5 years old.
Well, they're 5 years old now. Oh my goodness. They must be all over the place.
Yes.
Oh my Lord. You're one strong woman. Thank you so much for coming on and being willing to just be vulnerable with us and kind of share your story. So I'll let you talk. I know you had commented, and when I did the video about postpartum depression, about wanting to at least offer one mom, if it's one person we reach with this, some insight or some reassurance as to that she's not alone, that you would be totally willing to do that. So what was it like for you?
What was it like for me? It was hard. So just to set the stage, I had just turned 39 right before they were born. It was a really traumatic, really dangerous birth experience. And by the time we all finally got home, I was still ill, quite ill. But as the days sort of progressed, I didn't recognize myself. My background is sort of in social work and child welfare. And so I knew I was taking what's the test that you all give new moms to assess her?
Oh, how well the risk factor screen for how well you're doing, right? The mental health.
Yeah, so I had spent my whole career giving that same basic risk assessment to children in the justice system. And so I would write commentary on it. I would sort of take swipes at it. And I knew what to check to make sure that I didn't set off too many alarm bells. I remember pretty vividly just wondering what I had done, and that nothing felt the same, nothing looked the same. I have a very vivid memory of being in the hospital, and remember, it was pretty stressful and chaotic, and I didn't know why I was there, and I didn't know what was happening. I didn't realize I had babies even. It was sort of that stressful, and I was kind of that unconscious. And then I remember specifically sobbing a few days later in the hospital with my obstetrician, because they would send up pictures from the NICU of the baby, and I felt nothing.
Yeah.
I can still hardly say that 5 years later, almost 6 years later. I literally felt nothing. I knew at that point, it was a few days postpartum, I knew I had children because they kept telling me. And I knew that I was supposed to feel something, and I felt nothing.
You were emotionally disconnected. Yeah.
I was. They could have been anyone's babies. I didn't recognize them because I had never seen them.
Or held them before they left.
Or held them or touched them, or and I knew I was supposed to feel something, but I felt nothing. And I remember sobbing in my obstetrician's arms and her crying, saying, "I promise you'll get there."
Yeah.
And that seemed like something you shouldn't have to say to a new mom.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, I thought that it was just supposed to be magical. And I read on Instagram that it was just instant. And it just wasn't like that for me. And I don't think it's like that for a lot of women.
No, it's not.
I think that is something we do to ourselves or our culture that we shouldn't do. It isn't like that. So when I finally got home, the babies were home. I was taking care of their physical needs. So what I guess I want to say to a new mom is, I was absolutely caring for their physical needs, meaning I was trying to feed them with my body, which was almost impossible. I was setting an alarm to wake them up every 3 hours like I was supposed to. I was taking a shower.
You were checking off the boxes on the checklist.
Yes, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it was very robotic, and I was resentful. They were never in any harm. I was fortunate enough to not have any psychosis or anything like that, but I just wanted them to go back to sleep.
Yeah.
It's so horrible,
I know,
to say, but it's true. And I remember knowing that I shouldn't feel like that and feeling really filled with shame.
For feeling that on top of that. So it just compounded the whole emotion.
I remember sobbing in my husband's arms. I have a very, very privileged, supportive family. I'm very lucky that way. and they were all helping, but I remember begging to trade places with him and letting me go to work so that he could, and obviously that wasn't rational. The other thing that nobody ever talked to me about was the anxiety portion, postpartum anxiety. I had actually never even heard that term. And I am fortunate to be someone that hadn't really wrestled with anxiety in my day-to-day life, but I had this very vivid experience every single night.
I agree.
For weeks, where I would sit up in my bed gasping because I believed that I had rolled over on them and that they were suffocated. I think it's important to note that my infants were never in my bed. They were nowhere near my bed. I was kind of hyper focused on that, actually. And I had this reoccurring thing that happened every single night. And I just sort of wrote it off as a dream.
Wow.
But that's not rational, because I was having it every single night.
Yeah.
And I kept having these sort of reoccurring moments of irrational thought. One day I was holding one of the boys, he was crying, and I stepped outside to get some fresh air onto our balcony, and I was nowhere near the railing. The child was in no danger, and I just kept having these visions of dropping.
What if? Yeah, because you're anxious. What if I?
And I, again, had worked in mental health care and realized that this was not a rational thought, and I couldn't get back inside fast enough, and I couldn't close the door fast enough, and I started to hyperventilate, and I thought, something is just not right. I am not okay.
Yeah.
So I was checking off the checklist. There were lots of people checking on my well-being. I was not well.
Yeah.
And I had a girlfriend who works in healthcare and who had also had postpartum depression. And she said, will you do something for me? Will you circle a date on the calendar 21 days from today? And I said, why? And she said, because we need some point of reference as to whether everything is the same in 21 days or different.
Oh, wow.
So I went to the calendar and I circled it.
Yeah.
And every other day she called me. She lives in a different part of the state. And every other day she called me. And as the days sort of went by, occasionally there would be laughter. Or occasionally I would tell her something with even just a monicum of joy. And we could kind of reference that things were changing, because it didn't feel like it in my world. I just cried probably 22 hours a day.
Oh my goodness, Lisa.
And I was so embarrassed. And I was so afraid that someone would know how sad I was.
Oh, babe. Oh my goodness.
And I think it's important for your followers to know that these babies were the result of years of prayer, a gift from God, and multiple scientists.
Yeah, they are very much wanted.
Multiple rounds of IVF and loss. So they were very wanted, and I couldn't wrap my head around this idea that my life and my feeling didn't look like what it looked like on TV. And
I know.
It didn't feel like it. And I didn't know who to tell. Because I didn't feel like anyone could understand. And my family is wonderful and loving, but they came at it from a place of, I think you should take some medication. In hindsight, yeah, that would have been a good idea.
But not you should. Like right now, hearing that doesn't help me. Yeah.
No, it just, honestly, I think, yes, I should have in hindsight, but it made me feel less in control than I already did.
Yeah.
It made, what I heard was, and this is what I'm talking to you, new mom, who is feeling any kind of remotely similar things. What I heard was, you're not handling this well.
Yeah.
Well,
that doesn't help me at all.
It was true, but it didn't help. It made me feel even less than. And I just wish that I would have had the courage to actually get some pharmacological help, because I think it would have made a huge difference in the early bonds that I had or didn't have with the boys. It did start to slowly
get better.
I forced myself to do things only to check the box again. Take a 10-minute walk, take a shower, put on mascara. It was things that I could control.
You had control over.
And that I could do. And then my head, and I don't know if this is normal, maybe, or typical, maybe you can speak to this, but then my head sort of went to this place of, you're not bonding with them in an appropriate way. And because I had worked in birth to 3 for so many years, then I sort of took it to this whole new level of, now you're impacting their development and their well-being. And I think our heads are just really...
No, we sometimes work ourselves up to a place that doesn't help us. Like, you need to get out of your own head, get out of your own way. And when you were talking about checking the boxes and your friend setting an accountable timeline for you and say, we will touch base again in 3 weeks and see if things are different. I feel like those are tangible things that sort of help you regain control, because then your emotions are all over the place, and trying to get them under control makes me feel more anxious, because there's no way I'm going to do it. So the anxiety on top of the fact that I'm already feeling those emotions just makes it worse. So this thing that I can have control over, take a walk, 10 minutes, eat, sleep, bathe, feed you, sort of the cycle of it and the repetitiveness of it says, okay, I've done it. Okay, I can do this little thing. I can do more. Then I can do a bit more. Then I can do a bit more. And her then saying in 3 weeks, oh, we laughed this day. Oh, I felt a bit of joy this day. Gave you concrete examples of, see, you're handling it as best as you can.
It's so true.
So you're doing the best you can. And I think all those things add up, you know. They all add up.
I think you're right. And that 21 day sort of period was really meaningful for me, because a new mom doesn't know the difference between day and night anyway. It could be Tuesday or Friday. She wouldn't know the difference. But I physically, and she made me do it on a paper calendar, which I thought was even more interesting. Yeah. And it was tangible and I could control it. And I wish that there had been, and I'm sure maybe in bigger cities, we're kind of in a smaller rural community, but I wish there had been a place where I could have went. Like, I think about new moms right now and how isolating it is to be a new postpartum mother anyway, but how now she can't even go to Target. I mean, it must be even more isolating. I wish that there had been a place where I could just go and cry and say out loud how sad I was.
And know that you're saying it in a safe space, and you're not going to receive any judgments or any, you should be doing this, or this is,
Like, I pictured in my head, because again, I was a social worker, I pictured in my head creating this room with just newborn babies laying on soft mats and just grandmothers taking in new moms and
just hugging them.
Yes, because it was so lonely.
Yeah.
And I have all the resources in the world, a mother, a godmother, girlfriends. So I know that there are so many women and young moms and older moms that don't have that. And I didn't find any of my emotional needs met postpartum wise by any online community. That just didn't, for me, I
was going to ask about that. No, it would have had to be in person, the physical.
For me at the time, it would have, And I think it would have been really valuable in a lot of arenas. It would have forced me to leave the house, which it is hard for any new mom, especially a mom of premature multiples.
Right.
And it would have just been a place to exhale. And I think in other cultures, they do such a better job of embracing the mom. We just don't, in American culture, for whatever reason, we've decided it's more important what her body looks like a few weeks later.
Oh, yes.
As opposed to her well-being. And so it was just so isolating. And I'm an extrovert by nature. And I just knew, and I felt alone because most of my compatriots or people that I have come up with in the world, their kids were already in high school.
Exactly. I was going to say, right.
Yeah.
And now our kid, exactly. I'm 38 and my daughter is a toddler, and everybody else is like, they're teens.
Yes. It's just a different experience. No better, no worse, just different. And so it was hard for me to was hard for them to relate because their experience was over. And I just, also I think, and maybe this was your experience too, we could do a whole nother session on being an older mom.
I know.
I feel like the cliff is a little bit steeper because career, education, career, geesh.
And then you, it's like you crash.
Yeah. Like I still,
getting out of it is like, dang, this is a steep climb I have to take.
Well, yes. My best friend that I grew up with since I was 5, she had a different experience. She had a child right in like at 19 or 20. So her kids are out of the house. And she said, I just didn't know what I didn't know. So that whole thing was easy for me because I just rode the ride. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe is there a population of women that struggles with postpartum more than another population?
Right, so there are, and certain women, if you've had a history of postpartum depression before, then you do. Particularly for you, if you have preterm kids, a lot of the moms who go to the NICU struggle with postpartum depression. And that's one of the things that in the NICU that and I was going to ask you that, what do you think, me as a healthcare professional, because I would be the one taking the baby to the NICU, thinking, what could I have done differently for you, or for a mom, for a new mom in your position to potentially try not to avert any of this, or at least minimize some of this?
Thank you for asking that, because that's actually the one question that I wish I had been asked all these years later. So I have only high regard for all the healthcare that I received and that my babies received. I believe strongly we received high quality healthcare, and at times it was grave. With that said, the one critique or piece of feedback I would give is that I didn't feel a connection between the neonatologist and my OB. They had different,
like they're not on the same page.
They had different patients and different objectives, and there didn't seem to be, in fact, I know there wasn't, but there wasn't a conversation. So I was very ill, complete with catheter, the whole 9 yards, when these babies were discharged to me.
Yeah, and that doesn't make sense. Yeah, because that doesn't make sense.
Who can care for them, right? And so the one thing that I think sort of added to my anxiety was that in that particular situation, there was this overarching sort of, at least what felt like, celebration that these preterm babies were doing so physically well that their NICU stay was so short. Yay.
But
and it wasn't celebratory. I was overwhelmed to the point of shaking when I literally woke up from sort of this semi-conscious state, and there they were.
Oh, wow.
And it was frightening because I couldn't take care of my own basic needs.
Your own self. Exactly.
I mean, let's be real. I couldn't go to the bathroom.
Yeah. And then you have to take care of 2 people in addition to you. Yeah.
So I guess the one thing that I would say is, maybe, I know that everyone's schedules are different, and if there could be a conversation, at least for moms that are physically unwell, about what that plan's going to look like together. Right.
No, that's a very good point, because I think at least most of the neonatologists here in Yakima, we are very, our goal is family-centered care, and we try to have that discussion about, because we know if the family is healthy, the babies will be healthy. Like, there's no, I mean, come on, the babies need a good, healthy family to be able to thrive. So yeah, the babies are healthy leaving the NICU, but where are they going, right? What's their chance of success and health and longevity and all that good stuff? So that's a very good point that you bring up, and that's a very good take-home point for me to take, making sure that, I get on that same page with that OB, and I make sure and I make it intentional to do that. What would you say?
Not to interrupt, but the other thing that became increasingly clear through the maternal health specialists that we received after the fact was kind of, and this, I'm just going to be frank.
Okay.
I don't know how else to be.
That's the goal of this.
Yeah, and I think that we all come at things through our own lenses, and so we have to talk about bias in all of its form. And we definitely were on the receiving end of bias, and I don't meaning my husband and I are older, educated, professional, and there was an overarching assumption that we knew exactly what to do and that we could navigate this system and take care of these babies completely fine without any education or help, because we didn't necessarily meet the standard criteria. And it became really clear that that no one had, like
nobody took time to.
Weeks was still laying them in their bassinets, making sure that no one came and disrupted them, because there was one conversation when I was in the hospital about preemies needing to go back to sleep so that they cannot burn calories. So weeks and weeks after we had been home, I was still leaving them in their.
Wow.
So there was sort of this assumption that
you should know
we sort of looked this way, that we could handle this and knew what we were doing, and we in no way could handle this or knew what we were doing.
Right. That's an extremely good point that you bring up, Lisa, honestly, because because even me, like, I remember when I had Alia, and like her pediatrician would look at me and be like, but Raisa, Peter, look at me, but Raisa, you know this. Like, I'm like, no, but I don't though. Like, I need you to tell me, I need you to break it, I need you to explain this to me, because in that, you're a mom, your hormones are all over the place. And I've taken care of kids in the hospital, I've not taken one home with me to spry 10 hours a day. Like, I haven't done that. So walking through that process, taking away the assumption that, you know, you should know this, even if I should know it, right? Okay, great, I should. Thank you. I don't know it, but help me talk me through it again and tell me, and like, let's make sure we touch base every single time. That you hit the nail on the head, honestly, because I remember it so vividly.
It's so true. And I think in community, we sort of start to see populations of people, whether that be in a struggling socioeconomic community, we sort of make assumptions about what people's capabilities are. And again, I was a social worker for years. I understand professional biases that can really get in the way and that can really hinder all kinds of things. It became increasingly clear though, when she's no longer, that she retired, but the maternal health nurse who had seen everything and done everything was like, nobody told you you're actually supposed to hold them at home. Nope, no one told me.
Nobody told me. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
He's like, have you taken them? I remember her saying, because it was summer, it was August, have you taken them outside?
You're like, wait, what? Oh my goodness. She was like, yeah, Lisa, you can take him outside now.
You can actually like sit on a blanket.
What?
My mind is blown.
What would you say?
The other thing that really, really contributed, and I'm not saying this from a science place, so if this is inaccurate, edit it out, but this is my experience. I had a really substantially difficult time breastfeeding. Turns out if you almost die, it's difficult to breastfeed. So I was attempting to pump and it was excruciating and all these other things. Well, so for months, I kept this up every 3 hours because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And finally, my mental health had declined to the point where it just wasn't getting better. And the breast issues and the Raynaud's had gotten so bad, and all of the things were so that they would bring the babies to me and I would start shaking uncontrollably.
Oh my goodness.
And finally one day I listened to my own voice and said, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And I wrapped them in ACE bandages and instantaneously, Raisa, I felt better.
Wow.
Literally that afternoon. I could start
to weight off your expectations. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just all stuff I had done to myself, or we, had put on each other.
I completely agree with that 100%, because in my opinion, a fed baby is the best baby. If you're getting to the point where you're finding, I'm all for breastfeeding. If you're the mom who wants to breastfeed and you're sticking with it, and it's not adding an added burden, and it's not taking away time, and it's not mentally impacting you, have at it. Go ahead and do it. I, for one, I couldn't exclusively breastfeed because it got to the point where I'm stressing out about it. I'm not making enough. I have to work and take care of. I'm like, no, I just know we're bottle feeding. That's what we did, and it worked for us. So I'm really glad you got to that point, and I'm sorry nobody verbalized to you that it was okay. It was okay to mix feed or exclusively bottle feed, or just do what works for you and your boys, because a healthy mom is better than a mom who is unhealthy and breastfeeding, in my opinion, because you need to be healthy.
And the mom that's sitting in another room pumping, crying her eyes out, not participating in anything because she's supposed to pump.
You're supposed to be pumping, right?
No, you're supposed to be holding your baby. And
no.
Yeah. So that was really hard. I remember going to Target, and you got to buy a lot of formula when you have two babies.
Yep.
And I was loading it up on the belt, and I had remembered this conversation that I'd had with the maternal health nurse, who was a lactation specialist, who said, you're going to be judged for this, and you need to put that where it belongs, which is with the trash.
Yep.
And she said, and I was like, really? And so I remember being at Target late one night after they had went to bed, and I was loading up all this formula, and this woman was giving me the side eye and the up and down and the staring at me, and she was looking at my purse and then looking at me and sort of like this. And I turned to her and I said, please say it out loud. Please. Because I need an outlet. Just say it out loud.
Come for me. Just, I dare you. Come for me.
Lift it up.
Just try it. I need this. I need to release them.
Yeah, it was like slow motion. So luckily she didn't say anything.
Oh my goodness. What would you say for partners? What did you think helped you the most? Like, what advice would you give partners?
Oof, boy. I think it's a really hard role for women partners or male partners, I think, in any kind of romantic relationship, because you just aren't in the shoes. And so I think all you can do is be observant. And if there is a danger present, obviously you need to be forthright about that. But in my situation, it was obvious I wasn't doing well. And it was, I think, really uncomfortable for my spouse because it felt really vulnerable, I think. Like, I have these 3 things that I'm responsible for, and I don't know what to do. And nothing I say is right. There was a lot of reassuring, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of, you are going to be an incredible mother. Like, this isn't the sole definition of what motherhood is.
Thank you. Yes.
And
or even the most important definition, right?
Yes.
Not
absolutely.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of patience, and I will say that he's my husband is a very private person, but he reached out to someone he knew that had premature twins, whose wife was very unwell. And I think that gave him a little bit of reinforcement. But again, he had the ability and the wherewithal to do that.
Right.
I think I wasn't very aware of how irrational until that day on the balcony, like I talked to you about. That's when I actually had the voice in my head that said, this isn't rational. This is insane. You are not okay. And I remember I was sitting in a rocking chair, kind of really worked up about what had happened in my head. And he came home and I told him, and I said, I'm not okay. I'm just not. This isn't okay. And he took one of the babies and said, but we will be okay.
Aww.
This isn't us forever. Because when any newborn mom, whether she's over the moon excited or has postpartum depression, you feel like this is all I'm going to do for the rest of eternity.
Yeah. And I think that statement alone made me feel like sort of taking responsibility for the people you cared about and saying, you know what, this doesn't feel like it should feel right now, but I know we're going to get to where we need to be. Like, just that reassurance. It sort of, I imagine that it sort of felt, you had some relief of the responsibility of, like, I have to make sure that we are okay too. You know what I mean?
I do. That's a great way to say that. And I think that anybody who's had either situational depression or maybe chronic depression or any kind of moment in their life with extreme sadness, it feels as if you will be in that forever. And so if we can remind ourselves, this is temporary, this is temporary.
Yeah.
And the other thing I really wanted to say that I should have said an hour ago, my girlfriend that gave me the 21-day calendar, she also said something else. I remember calling her saying, I can't stop crying, I can't stop crying. And she said, why are you stopping?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, let it out.
And I said, what do you mean? And she said, do you know have you been sweating a lot at night? You know how new moms can oftentimes wake up soaked? I said, yes, I'm sweating. It's terrible. Sweating. And she said, why don't you just start to think about crying as getting rid of additional hormones and all that liquid that you need to get rid of? It's just another orifice.
And that took the anxiety of crying away too. It's like, okay, well, I'm crying. Let's just cry it out.
It did. And I feel like it was sort of a mind twist for me on that it gave me a little bit more control over it. Like, I can't control the sweating. That's just part of the human response. I certainly can't control this crying. And when she said, why are you stopping it?
Yeah. Why are you stopping it? Why are you trying to control it? Yeah.
Just let it flow out of you.
Oh, just let it flow.
That was pretty powerful.
Wow. No, thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for chatting with me. Thank you for chatting with us.
Maybe we should create one of those rooms with the grandmas and the soft.
You know, I would go to those rooms. I just like pop in and be like, I want to hang out with the grandmas. So you were mentioning traditions being the way traditions are and how they support new moms. And I realized that not that I took it for granted, but I know that I'm African. I'm Cameroonian from West Africa. And when I was about to have Alia, my mom came. She literally moved in with me, and she was with me in the house for like 3 months after I had her. And she was in the hospital. She bathed me. Like in our tradition, the moms and the aunties will be there. They'll bathe you, they'll cook for you. I remember this one time vividly, I just come out of the shower and she says to me, she goes, here, come here. I need to wrap your belly. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, this was like 1 week after I had a C-section. She's like, no. She put like lotion and like massaged my belly and then took a wrap and was like wrapping around my belly. I was like, okay, all right, thank you. But that feeling, it made me realize, because she hadn't been with me for years and years before that. And she came just for me having Alia. And I was like, wow, this is like, I was worried about what I would do when I had her, but she's here and like she's doing all these things that I don't even need to open my mouth and say I need this done, and she would do it. Like, I just took all that for granted, right? I took it all for granted. So community is important. Speaking about this, you know what, let's do that. Let's sideline this and create a room with grandmas who want to volunteer. And just,
I've heard, maybe you've heard this from patients too, I've heard that in parts of Mexico, a new mom, whether they birth at home or in a hospital setting, basically doesn't have to do anything for like 3 weeks. She just hangs out in her bed, and grandma and auntie, and they take care of the baby, and they take care of the house and all the other, whoever else is in the home. I just wonder why we became so solitary.
I know, like
sad and very unnatural.
It's all you, and you have to do it all alone. You can't do it all alone. It's impossible. Your body's covered. You're not supposed to. You truly aren't.
There was women in the cave who could breastfeed and women who could. I mean, there was all those roles for everybody, and
different roles. And that if you breastfeed, okay, here, you breastfeed the kids, and I'll go out and get the meat, and I'll go. Yeah. That's what it was. That's what community is. And I like that. We'll create that room, Lisa.
Okay, I would be happy. I will recruit the grandmothers.
I know. I would totally do it. Thank you for doing this. Thank you so much. And I'm going to keep you in my pocket as like my recurrent guest, because I like this chat.
Me too. It was fun.
It was fun. All right. Thanks, Lisa. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Take care.
All right. Bye.